Hello, my name is Nathaniel, and this is Impact 2021. For those of you who know, this is our continuing conversation that we have where, between myself and those of you who are watching, and oftentimes guests that come on, where we talk about issues, mainly revolving around religion, race, social topics, and different things such as that. And this is a conversation and participation conversation that relies on participation from viewers as well as guests. And as always, we go right into it. Now, one of the things I'm going to say before we get started is that we weren't here last week. Today is June the 15th, 2021. We weren't here last week, and it's because my voice decided to take a vacation. And my voice is not fully back from vacation. And so this may be a little bit briefer than normal, but we're still here to talk and have that conversation. And as always, feel free to type in any questions or comments into the comments section. They will be addressed. And the conversation also continues. So if you want to put in comments and questions, not during this live presentation, but if you watch this later on or you listen to this later on, you can always come back to Facebook or to YouTube and you can put in a comment and we'll continue the conversation because this is where we need to be. So today, what we want to talk about for the time that we have is we want to evaluate the role of church in everyday life. We know what the role of church is on Sunday, and we know what the role of church is in our lives as far as those who believe in God and believe in Jesus Christ and who go out and maybe the work of the church. But the question has been coming of what is the role of the church in everyday life? And so when we've been together and we've talked about different issues and we've talked about what is the response of the church or what is the response of Christians, whether it be in the past year, whether it be during different issues, when different issues arose, whether or not the church should participate in protests or should participate in trying to push legislation. Should the church participate when it comes to getting people out to vote and voting rights? Should the church participate when it comes into an arena of politics and leadership? Where does the church lie? And so you got to think personally. What I want to do is think personally. And this is not me telling you what the role of the church is, but us on a journey together to discover what is the reevaluating of how we look at church in everyday life. So not on Sunday, but on Monday, a day like today, where this is shot on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or Thursdays or Fridays or Saturday, where most people are out doing things where they're not even thinking about church. But where's the church during the course of the week? And so, there's a couple of things to touch on. And so we'll briefly hit on those. And if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to add those in. But there's different points to touch on. For example, right now in society, one of the things that's pretty big, and the conversation is now starting to be had is cancel culture. There's been some pushback against it now. And for those who don't know, and I know that everyone does, but we'll just say a brief description of cancel culture is that when people make mistakes, whether or not those mistakes are intentional mistakes, they have intentional mistakes, but when people make mistakes or when they've done something in the past that is now deemed no longer acceptable, that you are canceled out of the culture. You are punished, and your livelihood most likely is punished from the culture. So you're canceled out. For example, if you are in a leadership role or a prominent role and you did something 20 years ago, which we deem to be unacceptable in today's standards, then you should no longer be in that leadership role. Whatever form or benefit you were making in life, whether it be if you're a sports figure or if you're a entertainer or just whatever your primary revenue is, you are canceled out of that position. And that's what cancel culture has been. If you make a mistake, and this is not just people who are celebrities or things like that, but you and I. If we make a mistake, people will want to make sure that we lose our job. Talk to our employers or protest our businesses or our workplaces and make sure that whatever our income source is, whatever our primary position is, we lose that. That is the I guess the synopsis of what cancel culture could be. And as the church, and as we look at that, where do we participate as far as in cancel culture? We know that, let's just put it on the table. We know that that is against Christian values. We are not cancel culture. We are the people of grace and mercy. We are the people of the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and so on chains. We are not here to say that people are unredeemable. We are here to let them know that they can be redeemed. And so where do we stand in the fight against cancel culture? Because that's the only place that we have. It's not a discussion about whether or not we participate with cancel culture, but it's the question of how do we push back and let people know that as far as being a Christian, that is unacceptable. And so that is a part of the when we evaluate the role of the church on an everyday level, we have to look at everyday things. And since that is an everyday thing now, where is our role and how do we attack or address those issues? And how do we make sure that we show up for those issues? Another thing we have is this a new concept that you may or may not have heard about, and it's the love movement, or that's not the official name, but they're starting to call that. And it's a movement where you see some influencers, you see some prominent individuals are talking about love, and they're talking about just having love for one another, and in the sense of let's stop all of this division, animosity towards one another, the right, the left, the Republican, the liberal, even so much on as the people who want to change policing versus the people who want to keep things the same. What the love movement more so is, well, you and I can have a conversation, and you and I are good. So as long as you and I are good, let's just keep things, pretty good. Like, you're a good person, I'm a good person. Let's just keep it like that, and let's kind of just stay to ourselves. And you hear some really deep thought around this concept of, let's just love one another and move on. And the question then becomes, where's the church lie on that? Because the church is love, and God is love, and we represent love. And so I guess we would want to participate or be able to have a seat at the table when we're having a conversation around love, since that's our area. I don't know how most people feel, but I know my initial thoughts about the church and this love movement is that that's not what love is. You always hear people when there's a tragedy, a tragedy where someone has done something horrific, and they interview neighbors and family and friends, or they just interview people, and they'll say, a neighbor will say, well, Mr. So-and-so was always so nice to me. He was always so good to me. I can't believe this happened. And that's one of the things that is unfortunate about this love movement when you're talking about how the person deals with you. Of course, they may be good to you, but then what are they doing when they go home? What are they doing when they're meeting other people that they don't necessarily look like or necessarily like? And so as long as you have a good relationship with them, and as long as the love movement that you have with them is fine, then you ignore or may not see the harm and the hurt that they're causing other people. And we've had this discussion before when we've talked to some of our guests, where they have said that they want to kind of stay to their own neighborhood and stay in their own area and stay in their own zone and really not see all the noise and what's going on out there. That's what allows other people to get hurt, is when we don't listen and we don't pay attention, because that person was always nice to me. He may go home and beat on his family every day, but he was nice to me. So I'm not even looking at the scars that his children are coming around, or the spouse is coming around with, because he was so nice to me. And so I think that the conversation needs to happen as far as this love movement, if it does develop, as it develops even further, that the church makes sure that we have a conversation, or that we are prominent at the table in that conversation, and making sure that we have the definition of love. God is love. As we can go through, we can talk about how love is patient and kind, and we can rattle off what it is, but we need to make sure that we push out and let other people know that love is not ignoring others because you like the person that's in front of your face. That your neighbor is not the person that you can see. The neighbor is the person that you can't see. And that's the person that you also have to have love for. So, we need to make sure that we have participation in there, and that's another discussion point. And then, of course, as the church has to decide where we're going to be when it comes to these strong, hot button issues, politics. Is it time for us? We need to stop being used and abused by politicians, by celebrities, by just whoever, and really have an honest conversation about, all right, this is what the church is about, and these are people who are misrepresenting what the church is about for their own gain. It's it's funny. It's like a little kid. I think that we have to, as a church, as the real church, and we have to find our voice. It's like when you see a young kid who's just real timid and shy, and you're kind of like, hey, speak up, find your voice, say it with your chest. And I think that in the last couple of years, if not longer, we've lost the ability to kind of say it with our chest. The church. A lot of people have been speaking for us, and we've lost our ability to speak for ourselves. A lot of the more extreme churches or organizations who call themselves churches, and the people who are not on the same path as us, have been speaking for us. And the problem is, people believe that to be what the truth is. And so when we talk about cancel culture, when we sit back and we talk about the love movement, they're able to define what kind of values we have, or what kind of values that people should have. And the true church has been silent. And where are we at? Why are we pushing back? Why are we saying, hey, these are the definitions, stop defining us? And so I think that that's a part of the conversation of the role of the church in everyday life is, do we have our voice? We need to find our voice and speak our voice. And so lastly is, and this is just, I'm going to wrap it up with my little personal moment is, it's knowledge is really getting in the way. I don't think this is going to get any better when we talk about our relationship and not finding our voice. It's going to get worse because knowledge, I think, gets in the way. When you sit back and you look at it as a biblical reference, Adam and Eve, and we just talked about that recently here, about Adam and Eve and wanting it to get the forbidden fruit so that they can get more knowledge, so they can be like God, be knowledgeable. And one of the good things about what we have going on in society is that we have the internet and we can get all of this knowledge. Well, being smart sometimes gets in the way. Think about it. When you know someone who's really, really smart, and I'm not talking about someone who has, they're smart because they haven't, because of their makeup, the makeup in their mind. So someone who has Asperger's or who has a certain type of mental makeup, which makes them smart, able to focus differently. We're not talking about a situation like that. We're talking about just, for the most part, someone generally who's just very smart. A lot of times we look at them and we're like, man, you're just mean, or you're very arrogant, or, you're just a jerk. I can think about some people. I don't want to talk about folk, but I'll sit back and say, there was a certain politician, black politician, he ran for president, and he kept trying, very, very smart gentleman, or was a very, very smart gentleman. And he kept saying, if you people just understood, and you would just, if y'all would just read, and you would just do this, and would just continuously bash as if he was the smartest person in the world, and no one else really knew what was going on. And this person continuously would say things that didn't make sense, or that realistically he didn't have knowledge about. He was smart about what he was smart about, but because he was smart, he thought he was smart about everything. And I mean, it's Ben Carson. And so he sits here, and he's very smart in the medical world, but he thought that intelligence transcended into different areas. And truly, it did. He wasn't knowledgeable. He wasn't wise in these different areas. And a wise person knows that you're wise about what you're wise about. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell somebody else who is a doctor that I know more than them when that's not my area. But at the same time, you're not going to come in here. I know a lot about stocks, and you're not going to come in here as a doctor and just be like, look, I know more than you do about stocks and investments. Now you may, and then let's have that conversation. But you're just not going to come in here and just be like, I do because I'm smart. That doesn't make any sense. And so I'm going down this for a reason. The knowledge part is that there's so much knowledge out here, or information, that people think that information translates into knowledge. The same way that we had that want for knowledge, Adam and Eve had that want for knowledge, it's the same way people have that want for knowledge now. And they think that they're so smart, that they're smarter than church, smarter than God, and don't need that. And so I think that that's why it's important for us to continue to have our voice, because as people get this knowledge and get smart and get arrogant in that sense, they're going to think that they're too good for God. And I'll just be plain, until things go to crap, and they're crawling back like, oh my goodness. And so let's make sure we have our voice so that we can talk before things go to crap with them. Church is so much better when you can come standing instead of crawling. Come either way. But I would rather have come into a relationship with God walking into that relationship versus coming because everything had to go to crap. We do have some comments. And so a major concern is of what's going on in regards to the Southern Baptists and their position on critical race theory. There are churches saying they will leave the Southern Baptist Convention. That's a very good one. And we know the number one, and we just talked about knowledge, and one of the number one reasons that they're having a strange conversation on critical race theory is because of a lack of knowledge. There are people who don't even know what it is, but they're talking so much about it. Unfortunately, they think that critical race theory is just saying, hey, white people are bad. That's what we're saying. And then there's some people who have a full understanding of what critical race theory is, and they just don't want to take any responsibility for what has gone on. And so I want to keep reminding people, critical race theory has been, it's a conversation and an understanding and a study of the establishment of the United States was based on people who were racist, and some of those racist attitudes were built into policies which are now still here to this day. That is not a debate. That is factual. You look at the Constitution. How many of the signers of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, of the founding documents own slaves? And then sit back and say, how many of those, how much of the Constitution, how much of the laws in the Constitution was repealed? So if the people who own slaves, and those are not the only ones who are racist, let's be very clear. But if you have people who own slaves and were advocates for slavery, and were advocates for the treatment of Black people and the native people of this land in negative fashion, they established the laws. Those laws are still on the books. There is no debate. That is what critical race theory is. Racism was brought into building of the system, and it is still here permeating through the system right now. Because unless we take away all of the laws that were made by people who were benefiting off of racism and who established the United States type of racism, then you cannot say that it's not here. And that's what critical race theory is saying. It is the continued effect of racism and slavery in society now. That's facts. If those laws didn't disappear, that's facts. And so people don't understand that. They don't know what critical race theory is, and they're being ignorant in their conversation when they talk about it. So when you have the Southern Baptists sitting here discussing it and trying to decide whether or not they're going to address critical race theory, the number one part is half of them, if not half, the majority of them have no clue what it is. Because it's not something to debate as far as the factualness of it. It's just, hey, are we going to recognize that, this country was established on some racist principles and we benefit, white people, off of it. And to this day, people who are Black, brown, and other have not, or continuously are affected by laws that were established against them, or with them not in mind, or with them in mind in a negative manner. It's telling us that we're no longer 3/5 was not enough. And so, it's not even that, it's so weird because we can sit back and we can, if you are a person of character, I believe, you can sit back and say, as a man, many of the laws were established by, all of the laws were established by men. This was a system made for men, by men, and men benefit from these laws. And we have benefited over the years. Women have not benefited at the same rate because these laws were established for men. I can recognize that. I can recognize that I have it better than women have. As a Black man, I recognize that my path is easier than a Black woman's, and it's not fair. So I don't understand why you can't recognize critical race theory. It's ridiculous and ignorant. And so when the Southern Baptists are sitting here fussing over that, it's a great conversation that they're having because you're seeing some of the Black leadership they're really having to turn away. We talked about it in a different show where we had at least 3 Black churches pull themselves out of the Southern Baptist Convention because they just said, if you're not going to recognize our struggle, then we can't be a part of this. Had some other comments. The truth will set us free. And I think that's one of the things we need to that conversation needs to be established in truth first. There's no reason to talk about critical race theory when you're just going to lie and say that it's just about, not, when it's just about not honoring the great things that the country has done. It's about saying that everything that was done was terrible and that white people are terrible and blah, 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 blah. And that's not what it is. That's not what it is. It's a conversation about the truth. And as it says, the truth will set us free. So if you're scared to talk about the truth, then yeah, you don't want to talk about critical race theory. But if you're scared to talk about the truth, then you don't need to be a Christian organization because we need to be in truth. And so I appreciate those comments, and that's exactly where the conversation is going to go. And so hopefully next week, my voice will fully be off of vacation and I can talk without, clearing my throat every couple of seconds. But I appreciate everyone who joined. And then next week, we will also dive deeper into this conversation with some guests who will be able to bring in some insight as far as the role of the church in everyday life. Because again, what we're looking for here is not the conversation about what we need to do on Sunday. We know that. I mean, we know that. We got that. We can do Sunday all day, all day. The conversation now is Monday through Saturday. And the conversation is where we fit in the everyday life. And so please join us for that conversation. Join us with your comments. And remember that this conversation is just a spark here. And continue it on, whether it be with your friends and your family and other people. Continue the conversation. And that's why we're here, to continue this conversation and to make sure that we can get to some conclusions. My name is Nathaniel. This is Impact 2021. Please join us again next Tuesday. Have a good night or a good day and join us again. Thank you so much.